Hi, welcome again to another MasterClass. What we like to do during these classes is sit with parents and have really good conversations with people who are experts in certain fields to deal with conscious parenting, natural lifestyle choices. We do this for our Pathways Connect group here in Southwest Florida, but these conversations are really global conversations too. And this is one of my first opportunities that I've gotten to actually talk with someone who really inspired me a lot. She's an instructor for the International Chiropractic Pediatric Association. It's the organization that I teach for. And she has a course that speaks directly to October's Awareness Month, which is Infant Loss Awareness. When I was taking her class online, I quickly realized why she was added in on our program. Dr. Santos speaks from a very high degree of authority, both personally and professionally, on topics like this. And I just learned an absolute ton about perinatal mood disorders and mood and anxiety disorders listening to her. That was our topic for last month. If you want to hear Shannon Wisely talk about that, and please revisit that conversation. That ended up being a massive conversation. We had a lot of reach on that so far. A lot of people are sharing it and really digging in to understand how we help moms. This one is tougher, honestly, for me, because when I have had, you've been in practice for long enough, you get to know these people, these pregnancies really, really well. And unfortunately, we have had losses in our practice as well. And trying to walk with my first one with a family was something that required a team approach, not just around that family, which is kind of like why our Pathways group exists, to help people through stuff like that, but also for our staff too. It was something that we all needed to be dueling through. And so it never gets easier. I've learned to just listen a lot. And so one of the things that I wanted to do today was bring in somebody, Dr. Jen, who's has a lot to say on this topic. And so so I guess that's probably the first question for either parents who have gone through this process, or people who are around the people who have gone through the process. When we're talking about losing a kid, I can't imagine anything harder. Would you mind introducing yourself a bit and talk to us about the people you help?
Yeah. So I'm Dr. Jen Santos. And really this topic for the ICPA really came from chiropractors constantly reaching out to me because they knew that I teach. So I also teach for Life Chiropractic College West in Hayward, California. And so I would have students that graduate and go out into the world, and then they come back and they say, hey, I know you talked about perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. I know that you talked about miscarriage or stillborns or infant loss, but can we go over that again? Because when I was in school, I really was just trying to get through school. And now I have this patient that this is what happened. And it really came out of necessity, really, because people would message me and they would be devastated and they wouldn't know what to say or what to do. And I have my own personal loss. I lost my daughter at 23 weeks. And then that sort of transpired into when I was in student clinic. I had somebody that I was caring for that lost their baby at 38 weeks. And so I've seen this, and I feel like the universe was sort of preparing me for this. And it's not a fun topic. It's not what I would love to make my mark in our chiropractic profession about, but unfortunately, I do think I've had enough experiences and enough people who are feeling like they can trust me and feeling like they need to talk to me about it, that it sort of just kind of came from a place of true necessity as opposed to something that I really wanted to do. And so when I had the opportunity to get in front of Dr. Jeannie Ohm and explain, kind of plead my case as to why we needed this class, that sort of came to fruition. And it was So yeah, I mean, that was sort of the beginning of it. Since then, I've met people all over the world, willing to share their story with me, and willing to open up about their loss. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about is when somebody tells me their story, I want to know, well, what was your child's name? What was your daughter's name? What was your son's name? And sometimes people haven't named their child. And sometimes, depending on how early the loss was, I had a woman whose child died 3 days after the baby was born, and she had never named her baby. And she didn't want to name the baby the name that she wanted her baby to be named, because she wanted to have, in her mind, she wanted to, when she had another baby, she wanted to use that name for the next baby. And so part of that, I tell moms all the time, I don't want to should on you. I really think we should not should on people. But going through that journey with her and really talking about the importance of naming her daughter and coming up with an identity of who she was, or the potential to who she could be, would be really healing. And she ended up naming her daughter, and about a year later, messaged me and said, you have no idea how healing and therapeutic that was, because it wasn't just the baby that died. This was Emily, my daughter. And she was able to transition it from this kind of thing that they didn't want to talk about, that situation, to she was able to say her name and kind of continue the conversation without it being devastating. And I thought that was really beautiful in a lot of ways, that she was able to heal from simply just doing that. I feel like societally we're so people don't know what to say, right? And so a lot of times we go into our own mortality, if you will. We go into our own, oh, well, I'm a parent. I can't imagine what that would feel like, so I'm just going to kind of stay away. And because we don't know what to say. And a lot of times that's kind of just it. And I think that's kind of the biggest takeaway message from me, is there's not really necessarily the right thing to say. Everybody is going to be different. I've had people say, I just wanted my doctor to say I'm sorry. And other people say, I don't want their apologies. I don't want their sympathy. I just want it to not be this way, and so it's sort of like, there's not really a right thing to say, but there are certainly wrong things to say. And those wrong things to say can be really, really damaging to friendships, and really damaging to relationships, and personally really damaging to the person that's going through that loss. And so there are certainly things that very well-intentioned people will say that truly don't understand why it would be so devastating. But then when I say, well, these are things not to say, people go, well, yeah, obviously. But it's bizarre when you're sort of met with that, and you're like, I don't know what to say. So if you haven't practiced it, if we've been so conditioned by society just to kind of ignore it and like put it over there, then when it comes to it, you really don't know what to say. And you find yourself saying one of the stupid things that you really didn't mean to say, but it just kind of came out. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute, come back. One of my prime examples of this is, I had a woman that lost her baby. Her baby was born and lived for about 48 hours and then passed away. And she was out at dinner with a friend a couple of months later, and she's out at this, it wasn't a bar, but it was sort of kind of set up like that a little bit. And anyways, she's sitting there with her friend, and they're talking about her daughter, and they're talking about the loss that they had. And this woman kind of peeks over from next door. They didn't know her. She was a stranger. And she goes, oh, honey, I hear that you lost your baby, but I just want you to know, you're so young and you have so much life to live, it'll be fine. Like, you're so young and you can just have another one when you're ready. And this this woman that I talked to about it, she said it was so devastating. One, don't talk to me. You don't, you're a stranger in a bar, basically. Like, this is very bizarre, but also don't invalidate my daughter's existence simply by saying, oh, that's okay, just have another one. And so she went into having to kind of deconstruct, it wasn't like, could you imagine? And so what I tell my students is, imagine if your dog died and then somebody just says, that's okay, get another one, there's tons at the pound. It's like, no, that was your dog, that was and then you bring in the fact that it's a baby, and you've grown, a lot of times you've grown that baby, you've gone through the pregnancy, you've kind of developed in your mind who this child is going to be. And for someone to just minimize it so much and just say, that's okay, just have another one, it's okay, you're young, was devastating to her. And so those are certainly, the wrong things to say, but really, she was young. She's not inaccurate. She was young. She ended up having another baby, but it doesn't replace that pain. It doesn't make that go away. And so for her, that was definitely the most devastating thing of all of her, other than actually losing her child. Other than that, that was the most devastating thing that she could recall that somebody had said to her that really was not helpful in the slightest. And from that woman's perspective, I'm sure she really just meant it from a very well-intentioned place of love and trying to connect with somebody, but it was just really the wrong thing to say. And so
Yeah, that
so
was.
it,
I always tell people when I'm teaching that one of the superpowers I have is I screw up really
yeah,
hard. I mess up a lot,
yeah,
but I learn from it. And I had around the same time that I took your class, I had one of the biggest screw ups that I've had professionally, which was something I had been screwing up for years and years, because I was parroting something that I heard at one point in time that made a lot of sense to me, had my own interpretation of it, and it went something like this. So whenever I'd find out about a pregnancy, we generally wouldn't do any of our new patient pregnancy intake stuff until after 12 weeks, because if there's going to be a miscarriage, if the body is going to say, oh, this didn't get put together right, we're going to just hit the reset button, then I would say, well, I'll throw a party at 12 weeks. And I have a very good friend of mine. I've known her for years and years. As I was bringing up a similar conversation within our Pathways group, she told me how when she told me she was pregnant, and I had said that to her, how hurtful that was for her. And she had a lot of resentment towards me for a long time because of that. She ended up having a loss. And she said, the way to really go about that isn't, because I felt like you were dismissing the life of my baby. And the way that probably you should go about that in the future should be different. And I talked to my wife Danielle about that for quite a while. We talked in the office about how we approach that. And I really think that she was right. I think what I've done now is I just really celebrate every single time we have the opportunity to express joy for a life that was created, and to honor that in all of the ways that we can. And I think this is one of the reasons I wanted to do this class, because things like death are not something that any of us, I think, prepare real well for. We're not really well prepared for the loss of our parents. We're not really prepared for the loss of our children, especially. You never expect stuff like that. Or if you have friends that lose a kid, you never sit there and go, oh, you know what? I know exactly what to say in this situation, right? I know exactly what to do. It's something that unfortunately comes from really hard experiences. And so I'm really grateful that you've shared exactly, how well-intentioned people can just mean to try to make somebody feel better, but end up, doing the opposite. Yeah, you can state facts about it all day long, but when it comes down to it, these are feelings that a human has about the human that they grew, right?
right.
Thank you for that. That's really good. If you would say then, because I know you mentioned it, and I think this is a very valuable part of your story. Thank you. First, I'm sorry to know about the loss of your daughter. I know that you have some experiences having gone through that have also been really impactful for people. Would you mind sharing a tool for somebody who may have gone through a loss? Something that a few things that you found valuable in helping you with where you are today.
Yeah. I think the biggest tool is really trying to create connection on whatever that looks like for you, and simple things to remind, to celebrate. So for my daughter, the day that she was born September 23rd. And so every September 23rd, we try to do something. This past September 23rd, I was actually sick. And so my husband brought a cupcake, and I hadn't eaten in like 2 days, but he brought a cupcake home, and he was like, "This is for Autumn." And I was like, "I'm not eating that, but thank you." and it's just something special that, I don't necessarily publicly announce every birthday of hers. I don't, I, for me, it's been a long time now. And not that I'm over it by any means, and not that it's, not worthy to be celebrated, but, for me, it just, I don't necessarily need to every year, now, but, and now that I've taken over, now that I'm teaching this class, I talk about her a lot more. And so I don't necessarily feel like, I need to do that. But I think definitely in some way, whatever is comfortable for people, that there should be some sort of celebration or some sort of, way to remember the loss. And I more so, um, more so for friends and families of people who go through loss, it's really just lean in as much as you can. A lot of times when you go through a loss, you don't know what you need. And sometimes you don't necessarily need anything other than to just know that you're not alone. And I think that one of the biggest things that we do, exactly what you're talking about, 12 weeks, right? We say, okay, well, after 12 weeks, we're kind of in the safe zone. And statistically speaking, you're not inaccurate. You're more likely to have loss prior to 12 weeks. But what we've done societally is we've created this situation where we can find out 6 days before your missed period if you're pregnant. I mean, a lot of times, when I've been pregnant, as soon as I get pregnant, I know I'm pregnant, and my life changes. I start, going, okay, here it comes, and, but I think the other side to that is the amount of isolation that we've created from this 12-week mark, because we're not supposed to talk about don't tell anybody, don't post anything before you're 12 weeks pregnant. Yeah. But then when and if it happens, you're sort of left to suffer in silence. And I think that that's so wrong. I think that that's so sad, because one, you look at, and this kind of goes down a rabbit hole, but if you look at progesterone levels in pregnancy, progesterone is the hormone that we need to maintain a healthy pregnancy. That's a super important hormone. One of the primary ways that progesterone is stimulated in the body is through connection of women with women. And so when you are able to come together and women create that community, your progesterone levels actually rise. This is why women, and this goes into, it's so cool how our bodies do it. But when women live together, if you've had a roommate in college or whatever, you start to cycle together. And that's because progesterone levels start to come together, and they're elevated through creating that community. And so when we're connected with other women, with other groups, when women feel connected, when they feel safe and understood and loved, their progesterone levels are going to increase, which is going to put this almost, I don't know, blanket of safety over the baby. And so we're creating this environment where we're supposed to be secret about it. And then the unfortunate thing is so many people go through a loss, and then they might be public about it, and then people come and come and say, oh yeah, I've experienced that as well. And I've had so many people tell me, I had no idea how common miscarriage was. I had no idea how common stillborns were. I had no idea until it happened to me. And then I started sharing my story, and everybody around me started sharing it. And it's, so I think the biggest tool is really to be uncomfortable with the silence. Sometimes you don't need to say anything, but if somebody knows that you're there to love and support them through their journey and through their loss, that alone can be really, really powerful. When I was in school and my friend lost her baby at 38 weeks, I went over to her house and I just said, can I just sit here? Can I just sit on your couch? Because I didn't know what to do. So we sat on her couch, and we sat for about an hour, and she was just silent. And then she just looked at me and she said, I'm so angry. And I just looked at her and I said, I'm so sorry. And she just burst into tears and she said, I don't know. Now for her, I knew that sorry would be an appropriate answer. But she said, I don't understand it. I don't get it. This isn't fair. And I said, it's not fair. And just letting her sit there and go through it and kind of explain why she felt the way she did, really, she was able to kind of process that with somebody else there. And had I not been there, I don't know that, I don't know, she would have been alone. And I think that that's a big tool, is just being comfortable with the uncomfortable. Certainly, I feel like me having gone through my loss doesn't mean that I now know how every single person feels through their own journey. It's different. It's different for every single person. And that's also something that I think is really important, is to honor that just like every pregnancy is different, every loss is going to be different. And it's often more about creating some kind of community and being present with people, as opposed to necessarily the right thing to do or say. And that goes into, people aren't necessarily going to remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And that's really, I think that speaks volumes for that, is often it's not necessarily about saying the right thing, but being present so that somebody else can experience their journey in a beautiful way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really well said. I also think, as I'm listening to you explain how important things like entrainment are, like how our, how the female brain is wired for connection in a much different way than the male brain is.
Yeah.
And the ability for us to come together in groups for safety, right, has been something that is even wired into that distress response, that sympathetic response, into the male and female brains in a different way. That
Yeah.
the tend and befriend is the thing that we'll talk about when women are stressed, that they have a tendency to gather together and to take care of the area, but circle the wagons to help protect each other.
Yeah.
And Danielle and I had one of these classes where we talked in our first trimester. It resonated completely with us because not a lot of people have the opportunity, because they're afraid. We have this fear inside of us that, well, if there is a loss, then we have to explain that to everybody, and we have to, carry that around for a while and listen to all the people, like the well-meaning men in our lives, including me, who are not wired to just sit and be quiet, but find solutions. And how do I fix?
Right.
And how do I say the right thing so that you see that I'm a member of your tribe, so that I can show you I'm so empathetic, right? It's a
Right.
very different skill set,
Yeah.
to sit and to just reflectively, encourage questions or just not, and to be able to know how to just be with someone if that's not something that you're used to being still with.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful point to be able to honor each one of those journeys, and be able to maybe read the room a little bit better, and know that sometimes being quiet is enough helping, right? I
Yeah.
think we'll have a tendency, especially as men, to want to do a thing, and sometimes some of the advice I give those guys is, well, go out and build yourself a pergola, right?
Yeah.
Keep yourself occupied outside the home for a while. You'll have a real nice pergola at the end of the time, and maybe somebody who's happier with you for not just like getting inner space all the time. So
Yeah.
yeah, well, thank you very much for those. Those are amazing. Let me ask you, I guess, finally, I like, you have shared some really, really great stories about how you have interacted with people who have had losses, or have had people come to you and talk about it. One of the other questions that I have is for something that is a little bit different, but I think related. When you have parents who end up having a child that they discover for some reason may not be neurotypical, or they identify that we've got a congenital abnormality, and that baby is going to be born differently abled than some of brothers or sisters might be, and how that changes kind of how their life is going to be as a parent. What kind of things, tools or pieces of advice do you have for those families, or for the people around those families, for going through that kind of change in expectation?
Well, um, can I read a poem?
Love to hear it. Yeah, absolutely.
Um, so when I first got into practice, I was about six months into practice. And I had this baby come in, and let me pull it up first. And the baby came in, baby was 3 weeks old, not eating, not able to latch, not able to take in food. And I'm a chiropractor. I, start looking at the baby and explaining to the parents what we're doing. And I adjust the baby, and immediately the baby latches onto mom's breast and is able to nurse for a solid hour. Mom is in the office just fully crying. This was the first time in 3 weeks that baby was able to latch. So we go through the next couple days, and given chiropractically, I'm 6 months into practice or something. Given what I knew at the time, she was coming in every single day. And what would happen is she would come in every single time and nurse. She would get adjusted and then nurse for 45 minutes to an hour solid. And then after that would nurse for about 45 minutes and then about a half an hour, and then it would tail off. So mom was like, I'm going to get this breastfeeding thing down. And I started to notice a pattern with the baby, that every single time I would adjust her, it was like the very top bone of the neck, the atlas, I would have to adjust it again and again and again. That's not normal. that's like the chiropractor's like, you shouldn't have to adjust that every single time. But I didn't know what else to do, and I didn't know how to explain it to my mentors, that every single time I have to adjust it. It clears out beautifully, it adjusts really well, and then I have to adjust it again. And so the so we did this for 3 weeks, and I finally was looking at her one day, and I said, there's something abnormal. There's something something is going on. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the diagnosis is. I don't know, but this is not a normal pattern. And I don't know what that means. And the mom said, I know there's something wrong with my baby. And I said, I don't know what else to say. I don't, and I said, what does the pediatrician say? She said, the pediatrician says I'm a nervous new mom. And I said, okay. So we end up going through this series. Baby starts having seizures. And so the mom calls me and says, hey, should I bring the baby in? I'm like, no, go to the hospital. There's, go to the hospital, make sure that baby's okay. And they ended up basically putting anticonvulsant medication to the baby to the point that it was toxic levels for an adult male. So they said, we can't give her any more. We have to medevac her down to Oakland Children's Hospital. And so they put her on a helicopter, sent her down to Oakland Children's Hospital. And, I'm texting the mom, what's going on, what's happening. And we're going through this. And at this point now, I think I had been seeing the baby for about 2 months. And it was that same pattern. I was going in on my days off. I was adjusting her. She would nurse. And then, she would not nurse the rest of the day. And so we knew something was abnormal. And so they got her to Oakland Children's Hospital, started going through this. And the mom messaged me and said, we're going to do a brain MRI. They don't know what else to do. All her blood is fine. They're not finding any markers for anything else. They have no idea why. But at that point, she had been having a seizure for 8 hours on like the highest levels of an adult male, and they couldn't get the seizure to stop. So they put her into a medically induced coma. She was 12 weeks, 11 weeks old at this point. And they do a brain MRI. And the mom, and I say, okay, I'm praying for you guys. I'm here. Like, please keep me updated. And then the mom sends me this poem and doesn't say anything else yet. And she sends me this poem. And so I'm going to read you the poem. So it's titled Welcome to Holland. It's from Emily Pearl Kingsley. And it says, when you're going to have a baby, it's like planning a fabulous trip to Italy. You buy a bunch of guidebooks, make your wonderful plans, the Colosseum, the Michelangelo David, the gondolas in Venice. You may learn handy phrases in Italian. It's all very exciting. After months of eager anticipation, the day finally arrives. You pack your bags and off you go. Several hours later, the plane lands. The stewardess comes in and says, welcome to Holland. Holland, you say? What do you mean Holland? I signed up for Italy. I'm supposed to be in Italy. All of my life, I have dreamed of going to Italy. But there's been a change in the flight plan and you've landed in Holland, and there you must stay. The important thing is they haven't taken you somewhere horrible, disgusting, filthy. They haven't taken you to a horrible, disgusting, filthy place full of pestilence, famine, and disease. It's just a different place. So you must go and buy new guidebooks. You must learn a whole new language, and you will meet a whole new group of people you never would have met. It's just a different place. It's slower paced than Italy, less flashy than Italy. But after you've been there for a while, you catch your breath, look around, and you begin to notice that Holland has windmills. Holland has tulips. Holland has Rembrandts. But everyone is busy coming and going to Italy, and they're all bragging about the wonderful time that they have had there. And for the rest of your life, you will say, yes, that's where I was supposed to go. That's what I had planned. But the pain of that will never, ever, ever go away, because the loss of that dream is very, very significant. But if you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't get to go to Italy, you may never be free to enjoy the very special, very lovely things about Holland. And I got that poem and I went, wow. And I knew at that moment, she didn't say anything, but I knew at that moment that Harper, our baby, that something was wrong. And then she sent me a picture of her MRI. And I had never seen anything like it, but her brain was completely smooth. Now, I had just graduated chiropractic college. I was very fancy at the time. And I thought, that doesn't look right. And I remember thinking, the brain is supposed to have folds and rolls, and it was very smooth. And I thought, okay. And I'm trying to Google image search smooth brain, and lissencephaly comes up. And the mom sends me a text and says, she was just diagnosed with lissencephaly. And I say, yeah, I found that, and I'm like, okay. And I'm trying to read as much as I possibly can on my phone in the car about lissencephaly. And this is a terminal diagnosis. Most children, the degree that Harper had it, most children don't live over the age of 2 years old. This was their first child. This was a child that they had planned for, they had prayed for, they wanted. And I'm reading all of these things. And so automatically I go, I gotta email somebody that knows more than me. So I emailed Dr. Drew Rubin and Michael Hall. And I said, this is what it is. Please, what do you got? And they both wrote back and said, I've never heard of this, but it looks pretty grim. And so, yeah, it was a diagnosis for her specific grade of lissencephaly that she had. There were no documented cases of anybody living past the age of 2 years old. In January, last November, she turned 7. And in January, she passed away. And so she lived to be just over 7 years old. And that was our Holland baby. Things looked different than their parents had planned. This was the first. I remember talking to my husband when the diagnosis came, and I said, this is the first. When we work with babies, we do it for the high highs. We do it for the good, for when families are created, when babies are born, and we know that this is a baby that will outlive me. And I'm always excited. In practice, I always think about, I can't wait until I adjust a baby and then they come to me pregnant, and then I adjust their baby. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just, and I've seen it. My dad was a chiropractor. I grew up in a chiropractic office, and I know that that's sort of like just how it works. And I can wait because I don't want to get old fast, but but I'll wait patiently. But that to me is really what chiropractic is all about, is that. And I remember I ended up going down to the hospital and being with the family. And I remember holding Harper that day and looking at her and thinking, this is the first person in my practice that I truly believe will live less than me. And I was holding her, and I just remember how precious that this time that we get with her. She lived until she was 7. She had mental faculties of about a 3 or 4 month old, her whole life. But she knew me. She knew, and when she would come in, I would give her a hug. I would say, I love you, Harper. And I would give her, and it was a connection that I know meant something. And when she passed away, her parents were very gracious and generous to include me in, she passed away during COVID, and they had 20 people at their funeral, or at her funeral, and I was invited. And I just remember being so honored to be invited. And she said, "You don't understand how much you've impacted our lives with your love for Harper." And she said, you jumped in when everybody else was like, "We're going to give you space." You were like, "You don't need space, you need a hug." And she said, "And you never looked at Harper like she wasn't a beautiful windmill." And she said, "You always looked at her like she was just a different place, just a beautiful different place." And she ended up, so far she's had 2 other children. I've gotten to be at both of those births, and both of them are neurotypical, super amazing kids, but they got to experience Harper, and they got to love on Harper. And I think that was such a special relationship that they were able to cultivate and create for her kids. And so when she passed away, in our office, we created t-shirts to sell, and the mom wanted to create, she wanted to get swings that were wheelchair accessible for children, because she was in a wheelchair. And so we we had t-shirts made, and we were selling the t-shirts to help kind of fundraise getting some of those. So as of right now, we've been able to buy 3 wheelchair accessible chairs to go into the public parks, and they have a plaque on them that are Harper swings. And it's a really cool thing. And it was, to me, so interesting to see the parents instantly go into, "Welcome to Holland, and this is our beautiful Holland daughter." And that pain was never, it was always there. I mean, it was always sad that we knew that she was not going to live as long. It was a very real loss. But on the flip side to that, she fundamentally changed who I was as a practitioner, who I was as a mom, who I wanted to be as a friend. And so that little girl was able to do that. And I think that was really special. At least for me, that significant impact in my life. And I think the universe is really interesting, because it was at such a pivotal moment in my becoming a perinatal pediatric chiropractor.
Jen, Harper's story is really amazing. I remember when I listened to it for the first time, just what a good example of, I think, something that we do as chiropractors that might be a little bit different. I think it's something that I get from a lot of the other ICPA docs, is that we don't like shut it off ever. We're the kind of people that are just with people, and we just love community, and we're really focused on how we can help serve. And I think that's a surprise for a lot of people when they come into offices like ours, where they go, "Oh, so I'm just used to kind of getting cracked like a glow stick, and you guys are more like a college for for how I want to live." So that's nice. And I really think in times where people end up in crisis, to have someone that they can trust, that really does lean in, like you said, and really cares about them, is a valuable thing. I'm really grateful for the opportunity today to listen to you, and hopefully, this gets out to a bajillion people. So as Jeannie Ohm, who we referenced earlier, for those of you who haven't known about her legacy, she really, for a lot of, I would say, for at least one generation, maybe multiple generations of chiropractors, really informed how we approach what we do. And it was all about the elevation of the consciousness for Dr. Ohm. She was just such a light, and really inspired a lot of people to care super deeply about what it is that we're doing for women and kids. And so I think having tools like this as a doctor is super important, but as another human being, working with other human beings who are going through very real life things, I think that the words that you shared today, Jen, were very impactful. So thank you for your time away from your family to do this today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Is there, if you guys ever need resources, if you want to talk with me or talk with Dr. Jen, I'll have a way to do that. You can just leave us comments here in the MasterClass thread, and I'll be able to send those off to her, or I can answer if there's things that I can help with as well. But yeah, thank you guys very much for attending, and I'll look forward to seeing you next month.